There we go. We're going live now. Hopefully we can keep this pace up. We're doing a lot of reading and interlocutions and commentary as we go. My daughter's going to start reading books online, 100, 150 bucks an hour. We do this for free. Read the books, 5-6 hours here reading, commenting, trying to bring what we can to interested churchmen, serious students, and theological students as they're able. Realize you have a bit difficult, not difficult, but you're busy life, you have this, that, the other going on. I get it. Families, work. So you can't sit around read books all day. Some of us can, fortunately. We have that opportunity. But we do like prayer book churchmanship as Reformed Prayer Book Anglicans, morning and evening, 5 Old Testament and 5 New Testament in the morning, 5 Psalms and a day, and then 5 Old, 5 New for evening prayer. That's the schedule here. Maybe you have to adjust it accordingly. But anyways, we're doing Thomas Cranmer by Jasper Ridley, famous and competent historian. This volume is published by Oxford University Press, and it's got some library markings here. It's from Springfield Technical Community College, or wherever that is. But let's start with prayer, and I'm using the Sunday after Ascension Day, the collect of the day. O God, the King of glory, who hast exalted thine only Son, Jesus Christ, with great triumph into heaven, we beseech thee, leave us not comfortless, but send to us thy Holy Spirit to comfort us, and exalt us unto the same place whither our Savior Christ is gone before, who liveth and reigneth with thee in the Holy Ghost, one God, world without end. Amen. I'll just thumb over here to prayer we'll use at the end of our reading and commentary a little bit later. Get ready. So we're reading Professor Ridley's. I understand he's a descendant of Nicholas Ridley. I'd have to check on that, but I think somebody, if I'm not mistaken, said that what could you expect from a descendant of the English Reformation? I think I saw that somewhere. Maybe somebody can correct me or add commentary to that. I just forget it. As if a descendant is incapable of being objective and thoughtful. As far as the table of contents, too mechanical, too regularized, and being tongue-in-cheekish here toward the evangelicals who don't like our mechanical written prayer book, or even the Anglicans who don't like our no elbow room Westminster Standards, which is kind of funny. Well, I use a 700-page prayer book. Anyways, tongue-in-cheek, we love the brothers and sisters. We have some differences, and we note those. Hopefully, in a professional way, charitable way. Sometimes not. We get a little rough. I can be a little rough on the edges. Been around Marines. It's just kind of a rough environment. And even so, we have biblical parameters to be gentle and approachable and loving, even with people we disagree, our enemies. We certainly have that with the Gestapo dogmaticians called liberals. We don't call them liberals. Introduction, Cranmer and his biographers. This is an excellent chapter by Prof. Ridley. The first 40 years, Cranmer's 1489 to, what would that be, 1539, the first 40 years? Is that right? No, 1529, that makes sense. 1489, 1529, poor Tom. Takes a step down to work for Henry VIII, and he'd been a professor or lecturer at Cambridge, and instead of doing scholarly work, well, he continued to do that as Archbishop of Canterbury, but he had to work for Henry VIII. Thank God and his providence for that. But anyways, The Waltham meeting and the mission to Italy. That'll take up a whole chapter. That's very influential in Cranmer's life. He gets exposure to the German stuff going on as he pursues the matrimonial issue. And I don't find Cranmer too convincing here, but we'll see. We're open to alteration of viewpoints. Third is Ambassador to Ratisbon, represented Henry VIII to the imperial court of Charles V, I guess. Yeah. I got that right. We'll say it's in time. But he follows the emperor around. Meanwhile, Charles V has got to deal with the Turks and their invasion from the south. That requires him to go in a southerly direction and distracts him from the ongoing issues of the German Reformation and increasingly even the English Reformation. But this is pretty early. Then fourth, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Dunstable judgment on Poor Catherine of Aragon and the railroad job. You're getting my views here in Cranmer. Fifth, the royal supremacy, and Cranmer will be the diehard Erastian until he isn't. And he realizes he has to be Erastian to Queen Mary, and he is until he isn't. So finally, after 6 recantations, he realizes he's going to go to the death anyhow. And he was afraid. How did it compare with the other 287 men and women who died? There were 3 or 4 at Salisbury. I don't know about Winchester. Gloucester for sure, Bishop Hooper. I'm thinking of the guy's name, can't remember it. They sent him to their parishes or cathedrals where they were from to be a chill factor on the locals to not pursue Reformation. How about Tyndale? At least Tyndale, it's claimed that they strangled him at the stake, an act of mercy rather than burning him. I don't know, it wasn't there. I have to check. Prof. Danielle, I think that's how you say it. Great book on Tyndale. Chapter 6, the first steps towards reform. And one thing we're going to really see with Cranmer very early is his love of the Bible. Sola Scriptura. Maybe after this we'll read Cranmer's Confutation of Unwritten Verities. Chapter 7, the fall of Anne Boleyn. Cranmer's on hand to do the annulments of Russ program. You're never really rightly married to Anne. Off you go, and within a week or two, Henry's prowling around with a new wife. We really can't cut Cranmer some slack here. Maybe give him some attaboys, but we'll see. We're willing to reevaluate, reassess, come to different viewpoints. The formularies of faith in the English Bible. 9, the daily life and the secret marriage. Cranmer got married in 1532, and they made him Archbishop of Canterbury, and he's running around with a wife on the side. He had some kids, I think 3 of them. I don't think anybody survived into adulthood, and I think that's a kind of a dead line with Thomas Cranmer. His 2 sisters, one sister was a nun. One brother died, and another, Edmund, he went off to the continent, the exile. I forget what happened to him. I think he died in the continent. He was the Archdeacon of Canterbury along with his brother Thomas. Chapter 10, the negotiations with the Lutherans. Henry was always mad that Melanchthon wouldn't come over. Not befitting Henry Tudor's dignity. Got to come over here, thought Melanchthon. Never did. And apparently an unhappy situation. And Cromwell's floating around in the background here too. And then the everlasting troubles at Calais, the case of Lambert. Cranmer consented to the death. John Lambert, English reformer. See, he's got to own that. The very death that Tom Cranmer would die, Lambert. John Frith. Robert Burns. So we want to reassess all those situations in the broader context. And then chapter 12, the 6 articles, sometimes called the 6 whips. He argued against it with Henry, as I'm told, and argued against it in Parliament. But when he lost, he became the loyal Erastian. Henry wanted it, that's okay. People died by that, too. 6 articles, bishops Latimer and Shaxton resigned. Why didn't Cranmer? Man of principle. 1540, the fall of Oliver Cromwell. We'll try to debride that complexity. Catherine, chapter 14, Catherine Howard. She was the little hot lynx, hot cat in a tin roof who gets, I think, legitimately involved in some adultery. Tom has to be the one to break the news to Henry. Does so at a communion service. I don't know which abbey it was, but he hands him a written note. We got a problem here with your hot lynx. Get rid of her too. And then chapter 15, the prebendaries crisis, the crisis of 1543, where the guys doing backdooring. Prebendaries of Canterbury in a league with our good old friend Wiley Winchester, Stephen Gardner. We'll try to get into that a little bit. Cranmer nearly fell. They thought he was going to fall. In fact, they thought he was going to fall when Robert Burns went down. And Henry interceded on behalf of his most famous heretic of Kent, called Thomas Cranmer. Henry provided cover for him in the providence of God. Chapter 16, the new policy, the death of Henry. That's when Thomas Cranmer begins growing out his white beard. He said it was in memory of Henry VIII. Well, yeah. But also they wore beards, reformers did, to show that they weren't Catholic clergy who were clean-shaven. You look at the pictures of Thomas More, clean-shaven. Stephen Gardner, clean-shaven. Even Cranmer, clean-shaven. Until the death of Henry. And then we get the picture of him with the long, full beard. Chapter 17, Edward VI, the boy king, boy Ed Tudor. The Book of Homilies, and that would be Dr. Gerald Bray's got a critical edition. It's worth having, worth reading the homilies. They were part of the confessional and sermonic material. But, excuse me for a minute, there we go, gotta hit a cord in the way. Meanwhile, the parasites, Tractarians, whom Jim Packer calls squatters in the Church of England. They're all into their ornament works and their hats and their bulb. They get excited about our 16th century clothes, not about the 16th century 39 articles or the 16th century homilies. It's part of the Anglican confessional tradition. While Dr. Jim Packer complains about precisionism. Gotta laugh, some said grammaton, gotta laugh a little. Here we see some flaws and faults with our brothers, which we certainly have, and which we confess at evening prayer, morning prayer. We've erred and strayed from thy ways like lost sheep, O Lord, trusting too much in the devices and desires of our own wicked hearts, having offended against thy holy laws. Having done things we should have done, not done things we should have done, because there's no health in us. We could go on, but chapter 18, the Book of Common Prayer, 19, the revolts of 1549, and Peter Vermigli was a table companion with Tom Cranmer at Lambeth and helped him write the rebuttal to the Cornish Devonshire Rebellion. It's actually Vermigli And Tom took it and translated it verbatim and gave it in Parliament. Vermigli, apparently, according to Dr. Torrance Kirby, kind of gets airbrushed out of Anglican history. He attributes it to English exceptionalism. We don't want an Italian reformer having too strong a hand here. A continent over here in England, Italian, and Bucer from the continent. Now, Dr. Gerald Bray has a great big thick book, Tudor Reform, which deals with Tom's project on canon, revision of canon law. Vermigli was involved in that. But the idea and thesis I'm working on is that Vermigli and Thomas Cranmer were almost a mirror image of each other. Theological double predestinarian, reformed on communion. Vermigli was willing to go with the prayer book. Bucer helped with prayer book revision. Hooper was there. Our great friend from Scotland, John Knox, and others. We got to look at the Book of Common Prayer, both 1549, 1552, which was a revision, a few corrections. It's weird to me that TECers like Bob Duncan and Jack Eicher and others like this 1549. Let's put the 1549 book on the shelf where it belongs. Hardly to be consulted again. Thomas Cranmer had a 1552 prayer book, and there's no reason to think he wouldn't have gone with further reforms later. Like to make a big deal of Richard Hooker, put him on the shelf too. He wasn't even known hardly. But later guys come back and mine his work, and it's hardly influential. I don't think. I'm willing to revise that too. Send me a corrective email. DonaldPhilipVeach@gmail.com or Facebook or here below. I need to learn. I need to learn whatever you can offer me on Cranmer. I'm not entirely happy with every presentation of him. I'm thinking I had a science background until seminary. Tacked on philosophy in my undergraduate, basically chemistry, but high school, math, and science. So I think that way. I think Hodges' approach to systematic theology is a good one. We're looking at data. Got some data I'm not thinking about. Let me know. Then the conflict with Hooper gives a separate chapter to that. 21, the last years of Edward. 22, the traitor. He had some long sufferings. He was in jail very shortly after Mary ascended to the throne. He was in jail within, I think, 3 months. We'll revisit some dates. It went along before the Archbishop of Canterbury is cooling his heels in a prison, along with others. Chapter 23, the heretic, and chapter 24, the recantations, is a pathetic scene. And he was criticized often for being lukewarm and tepid, depending on who was talking about him. But let's see, I've got to set my little clock here. Don't go over. Don't go too long. Had they spared his life, I'm wondering if he would have ultimately held to his recantations and been the consistent, logical Erastian. Mary said it, I got to submit. Well, I think when it became obvious and evident he was going to die, they said, okay, that's it. I might as well. And he did. He had a glorious recantation of the other recantations. And we'll address that as we come to it. Really pathetic to watch an old 67-year-old man facing the stake. And of course, he was an Archbishop of Canterbury, and Mary wanted his head. Recant or not recant, it was official policy. This guy's going down. The Pope wanted him to go down. Cardinal Reginald Pole, the successor to Thomas Cranmer after they degraded Cranmer for the Archbishop, Cardinal Pole was behind that. He wanted him burned. Oh, and Steve Gardner. Oh, yeah. Although, interestingly, Stephen Gardner died 4 or 5 months before Cranmer. but he was involved in the burnings too. And he had to eat crow because he supported the English supremacy, which then was overturned with Mary and Philip. That's okay. They kind of let those guys off the hook, but Gardner was involved in burnings. I saw his wretched tomb at Winchester. Gardner said towards the end of life that Peter repented, but I never have. I wonder what that means. Anyways, he died in, I think it was November of 1552 before Cranmer of March 21st, 1556. I'm sorry, Stephen Gardner, November 1555, 4 or 5 months before Cranmer, 21 March 1556. He died. They gave him the state funeral, big funeral cortege. It went from London. He died in London, the bishop's residence there for Winchester, and they had funeral cortege down to Winchester Cathedral, one of the richest, second or third richest in England, I think, cathedral. Place where he married Mary and King Philip II. Long story there. But they gave him the grand state funeral while the Archbishop of Canterbury, previous when Tom Cranmer was in jail. And Winchester got a state funeral. Maybe we'll have some time up in the future to do some more work on Stephen Gardner, lawyer. Cranmer was always paying him for being a lawyer. It was kind of not a Bible man, not a biblical scholar, but a lawyer. Even Henry knew he was a crafty guy. And he cut Stephen Gardner out from being the executor of his will because he realized that his privy councillors would be unable to constrain this Machiavellian bishop. They cut him out. Henry knew how to use him, and he did. We'll see as we go. Anyways, the introduction by Prof. Ridley on Cranmer and his biographies is worth the price of the book. We'll go through it here and offer interlocutions and glosses. Here he goes. Few characters in history have aroused as much controversy as Thomas Cranmer. Well, yeah, in the Church of England, I think he's a forgotten figure now. Episcopal world. I mean, they know his name, but not much else. For 400 years, he has been bitterly attacked and ardently defended by biographers and historians, as if the righteousness of the English Reformation and the justification of the Church of England depended upon the moral probity of the man who was its first archbishop. Well, let's interject. He wasn't the first archbishop. It's the 69th, if my numbers are right. He's the first Protestant Reformed bishop, the first Reformed Archbishop of Canterbury. The Roman Catholics have hardly troubled to waste their ammunition on so easy a target as Henry VIII. And the Protestants have not been particularly concerned to defend the reputation of Thomas Cromwell. But the character of Cranmer has been a contested, bitter issue between John Fox, and Sanders. He was a contemporary at the time, I think. I have to check that. Between Burnet and Bousset, a century later. Between Todd and Lingard, we got up somewhere up on this side here, those volumes. Between Pollard and Belloc, Pollard's up there too. I'd like to kind of maybe do Pollard. He's a good historian. Nearly every important action in Cranmer's life has been interpreted both favorably and unfavorably. And I think this is more of an Church of England thing than certainly American Episcopal Church. Dermot McCulloch has written a tremendous volume in 1996 or 97, which is a magnum opus. I think there's a great flurry of biographies in the 19th century as the squatter tractarians, which is Dr. Packer calls them. I call them termites. They're parasites. Get into the beams of the house. I had termites here at the house, real bad over on the other side. I had to bring in Orkin, the termite company, and had to set up a perimeter watch, cure the area, do some stuff under the house. But these things, you don't even know it, but they get into the wood and they start eating, and you get some structural damage. But termites, it costs us $4,000 or $5,000 to get it all fixed. We're done. They come out every year and give us an annual certification to go around the house. But it's interesting the way they fight termites. And I think with these tractarian squatters, you just have to do good history. They've been debunked historically, but that's another story. Anyways, Cranmer's remarks to his secretary about his ill treatment at school have been put forward as an excuse for his weaknesses and of his example, his tendency to put the blame for his feelings on to others. His undistinguished career at Cambridge. Who says? Is cited either as proof of his innate intellectual mediocrity. These historians say this stuff. Now, this isn't Pollard. He's just commenting on how some have handled Cranmer. Intellectual half-wit, mediocre. They said that about him until he got up and defended his view of the Lord's Supper, December 14 to 18, 1549. Before the 1549 Book of Common Prayer came out, which then was interpreted as kind of Lutheran Romanist. Same thing, basically, just different. One has Aristotle, the other doesn't. Cranmer got up 1549 in front of Parliament. Everybody thought he was kind of tepid, lukewarm, but he gave a brilliant defense of the Reformed view that Christ's body was not ubiquitous in the elements. And Bartholomew Treharron, who was an eyewitness to that, he said that forever shut down the argument. He was an incompetent theologian. And he had his commonplaces, and he had his own notation system, and we can maybe get into that later. But he was an intellectually mediocre, tedious, copious note taker, avaricious reader, up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I think Maurice tells us. Or they tell us of his commendable dissatisfaction with the university syllabus in the old papist days. Well, let's see what happens here. His protestation at his consecration has been denounced as perjury. I don't think that. And praised an outstanding example of moral rectitude. You see the polarities here. His letters after the arrest of Anne Boleyn and Cromwell have been seen as courageous intercessions or cowardly betrayals of fallen patrons. Something to be said about that. To the Catholics, and he should say Romanists here, Ridley should. His changes of opinion in questions of religion, doctrine suggest unscrupulous opportunism. Close quote. I don't think so. Cranmer was a little bit slow when he dropped the judicial, exegetical, theological gavel on an issue. He stayed there, at least until his recantation period. To the Protestants, they show his broad-minded approach and readiness to admit that he had been mistaken. His first and second marriages. Now, Tom was married. Oh, what's the date there? Am I going to say 1511 or 12? Some want to say 1515, 16. To Joan, of Dolphin Inn. We'll get to that in time. A second marriage to Marguerite, niece to Osiander, the Lutheran, German Lutheran. Did that under the radar screen, which violated his canonical oath to be celibate. Some say he didn't take that, but everybody understood the priests wanted to be married. They looked the other way. It's like in Italy. Italian family tell me they were happy when the priest had a woman on the side. Then at least they knew. This is an Italian family. Then at least they knew he wasn't a boy fiddler or a pedophile. They kind of looked the other way. They still do. The chaplain corps, man, it was I'd say every 2 out of every 3 chaplains was a homosexual. They had their own kind of lingo. They'd refer to one another as, yeah, his wife is with him. We had a guy in Naples, Italy, commander. Took his boyfriend with him. But you see, in the military, if you had a family, lawful family, like I did, you'd get a little extra money for family dependents. Well, you see, the Catholic priests couldn't get that because they couldn't claim a dependent. But nevertheless, the income was enough, substantials, commander's salary. This guy had his girlfriend. That's my word. That's another Roman priest saying that about his colleague just across the road. Captain colleague, about his commander colleague. He has his girlfriend living with him, his wife. They talk about among themselves all the time. So I'm not Roman Catholic priests and celibacy. Oh, boy. And the chief of chaplains was homosexual. Everybody kind of knew it. I had a command chaplain on my first aircraft carrier. He was too. It was under the radar screen, but some indications. Well, whatever. Anyways, Tom got married a second time in 1532, and then to Marguerite, had 3 kids, I believe. His conduct at the time of the 6 Articles, and I'm going to have to agree here with the papists. And his attitude during the coup d'etat against Somerset, that's a little bit later, Edward's time, had been vigorously attacked and defended. Even his recantations at Oxford have been excused, if not condoned, as resolutely as they have been condemned.
I said, oh my goodness. Look at you. Wow, how do you feel about this?
I'm in the middle of recording, but okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
How do you feel about this?
Well, I wonder how you feel about
Oh, I'm excited, Phil. Give me a hug.
I've got enough room, I think.
Oh, I'm proud of you. See the word proud? That was a hard job to do.
Well, I think the kids' books will fit in there too.
Oh my gosh, maybe we can even get them off that shelf. So you have just.
That's what I'm saying.
Man, that'd be
Just
great.
straighten all that out and fix it. Or maybe not even on the shelf, I don't know.
Yeah,
But at least not that crappy.
yeah, oh man.
So,
Very good. I'm excited.
so this is gone. I swept up in here.
Oh, wow. Then we gotta get it cleaning under that desk next.
Well,
Move the
little by
desk
little,
back. Yes, outstanding.
we'll go back and
Good job. I gotta get something. I gotta fix some clothes. I'm on my way to the trainer, but I'll watch it later. Oh man, you guys have some good lunch here. Where's, I didn't take those, I know I took those, did I? Who took those? No, I took them. complaining, maybe, clean all this up, don't leave any food out. That's part of eating. I'm sorry to be such a nag about it, but we want to take care of our house. Keep it, you got it under. You should not have the gear on it. I do. There. There. Got him. Why do you have my robe on? You have clothes for that. So put your own clothes on. AW diet.
Oh, diet. Okay. Okay.